Hello and welcome back to the Know It Alls Talkball podcast. Today we've got a quite different episode for you guys.
Two-parter.
It's a World Cup special, but this first part, which should be released first, is gonna look at pretty much everything wrong with Qatar hosting the World Cup.
And there's
everything.
a lot.
There is a lot
a
to
lot
get through.
wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you're all quite aware at home if you're listening to this about sort of the scandal with the Qatar World Cup, which also has now even ramped up as the World Cup is actually about to take place with a few issues there. So yeah, we're going to just get into sort of this very controversial tournament that has turned a lot of football fans, like it's divided a lot of fans, hasn't it?
Yeah. But I think the best place to start for this is the bid itself, which took place in 2010. And since then, there's been a lot that has come out from this whole process. So to start with 2010, it was the first time they decided to do a double World Cup bid. And that pretty much kicked off a bunch of different behind the camera sort of shady deals between a bunch of characters that were present there. Let's get into some of this. So this is quite an interesting thing to start off with. A little disclaimer before we get into what I would call corruption. There hasn't actually been any definitive proof linking the Qatari government to corrupt practices or buying bids.
But there are like a lot of loose links. Well, not even loose.
It's
You'd
not
say
even
pretty
loose.
concrete
That's why
links.
I don't understand. This is so to start with. 16 of the 22 FIFA Executive Committee members that were present at the announcement of Qatar hosting this World Cup have either been implicated or investigated for alleged corruption or bad practice. So already that.
I mean, it already is. So if you think about it, right? How shady is it? First of all, like you said, 16 out of 22 caught in some sort of corruption scandal. And the fact that for the first time in history, these old men, because they're all men, realistically, these old ass men who saw another quick paycheck, they were like, I'm not going to make it to 2015 or whatever when the next World Cup is announced. How about I just take this bribery money, alleged bribery money, of course. But how about if we take this money now? And that's basically why the World Cup, why it was a double bid, which I think also benefited Qatar. There's no way that if in 2015 Qatar bid, they would have been ready for this World Cup. I mean, This is something that has taken 12 years to get to the state that we are now. Yeah. And even then, when you see the fan rooms that they have and stuff, it doesn't really seem like they're sort of that prepared. I mean, it's kind of like a tent with two beds inside, like...
Nice.
What is that? What is that? And also, like, the disparity, I mean, it goes a bit away from the selection bid process, but, like, did you see, if you haven't seen it, have you seen where the France national team is staying?
No.
They're staying in, like, the biggest villa I've ever seen in my life. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. And the Argentina team is staying at the university hostel. So, like, I don't know if it's because we can't pay for the villa. That's probably part of it, to be honest. Yeah. But... it's just the disparity has been insane, and also just the fact that bid, like, I think very few people at that time expected Qatar to actually have a shot of winning the election. They were going up against the U.S.
Going up against the U.S., I think Japan were...
And Korea, I think, were also in there.
So countries that already have incredible infrastructure. I mean, if it was in the US...
And have hosted World Cups.
Have hosted big sporting events. I mean, Japan's done the Olympics since then, obviously marred by COVID. Yeah. But,
and the World Cup, too. In 2002, it was Japan-Korea. That was where the World Cup was hosted.
Exactly. So they have experience in doing these things. So it's really surprising just looking at that Qatar was chosen. But I want to get into... some of the allegations around some of the actors that were present at the World.
I'm sure we're going to talk about Mr. Jack Warner, aren't we?
Jack Warner, but I want to touch on this guy first, Mohammed bin Hamad.
So he was the president of the AFC, right? The Asian Football Confederation.
He was the FIFA Executive Committee member for Qatar.
Right.
So he was accused of making payments totaling $5 million. To help Qatar's World Cup bid, and he also paid $1.6 million into your man Jack Warner account, the former vice president of FIFA. And Bin Hammam has since been banned for life from football by FIFA's ethics committee. So I find it really hard to believe that on the one hand you have an FBI investigation that didn't find anything concrete, sort of with the Qatari government buying bids, but then you have this FIFA executive committee member who has been paying these
put
sums
two
of money.
and two together,
Yeah,
right? Like,
and
there's clearly shady shit going on.
and then gets banned for life as well. And then you also have a Spanish businessman called Sandro Russell. So he had ties to business in Qatar, and he paid 1.45 million euros into the bank account of the daughter of the then president of Brazil Football Federation, Ricardo Teixeira. So into the daughter's account, and he then, after sending that payment, sent an email with these words: "This means I'll be able to invest this money for my interests that I hope finally will be yours."
Wow. But we don't have any concrete evidence,
We don't
right?
have any concrete evidence. I mean, that's the thing. They weren't able to tie these sums of money directly to World Cup bids.
Yeah.
And that's why the FBI investigation wasn't really able to properly indict anyone. Well, they did indict people, but they weren't able to bring any charges against anyone. And this sort of thing continues into, I think you've got some stats on, and Jack Warner there as well. He was someone who caught really red-handed.
Yeah, so Jack Warner was also thought to, Jack Warner's history of corruption and taking briberies goes back quite some time, because he allegedly accepted 10 million euros or US dollars, sorry, from the South African FA to have his vote. And why is Jack Warner so important is because he was not only the vice president of the FIFA executive committee, but he was also the head of CONCACAF football. So every football of the Caribbean and the US and Mexico. And despite that not being a region with like lots of football success, it's a region that's very important to FIFA because there's so many countries there with each their own football association. And the thing is that FIFA itself does not have a governing body to regulate where this FA money, because, part of it, like, of course that's still bribery and it's not correct when there's a voting system and it's supposed to be a democracy. But, sort of the deal is like, okay, well, Jason, I'll give you 2 million to the New Zealand Football Association and you vote for Argentina, right? It's still bribery, but at least the thought is that the money goes into development. But actually, FIFA itself doesn't have a regulation body that checks where this money goes. So obviously 10 million straight into Mr. Warner's pockets, right?
Yeah.
And it's just the amount of money that has been shifted around, especially with the Qatar bids. There's also rumors, which I think we have to highlight this woman. Her name is Phaedra Al-Majid. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But she's basically the one that exposed Qatar's bribery bid. And now she's been, what's the word when you're removed from the country?
Deported?
Deported? Yeah. Extradited from the country.
Extradited? Oh, God, I know what word it is as well. But
let's say deported. So she's been deported from the country because she used to be part of sort of the...
Exiled.
That's the word. She's been exiled from the country. So she was the one that initially put out sort of the word that Qatar was paying for its bid, specifically because she said that she was in the room when his name is escaping me now, but the guy who was like basically the head of the Qatar bid, when he went into this room with the 3 guys from the CAF, so the African Football Federation, and paid them each $1.5 million to ensure their vote. And obviously, the Qatari government and the Qatari sort of selection bid committee have come out and denied all these allegations. Phaedra has had to escape the country. She said that she receives death threats all the time, that she's still unsure about her safety. And it's just like, it's clearly a vote that was bought. And when you even have Sepp Blatter, who's maybe the dirtiest man in the history of football, him alleging nowadays that it was a biggest mistake of his career to give the World Cup to Qatar, that should tell you something about the state of this, right?
Yeah. And something that I found as well when I was doing this little bit of research, you you don't even have to look that deep. You just have to sort of look into the characters that were present there at the time of the World Cup bid. So, like I said, this was the first double bid. So you had a lot of people there from Russia. So Vladimir Putin was present at the time for this. Also, one of his number twos, Vitaly Mutko. And he's a key figure. So he also was a key figure in the Russian doping scandal, the state-sponsored doping.
The Netflix Icarus.
Icarus, yeah. So he had a big role in that. And then on top of that, you also had Michel Platini, who I've mentioned already, who's I think he's been banned and then maybe unbanned from football. And you had him and Nicolas Sarkozy, who was the former president of France. Now they got wined and dined at a Qatari palace a few weeks before Platini changed his vote to Qatar for the World Cup. He said it had nothing to do with it, but I mean.
Apparently, what was said at the dinner was like, think of the best interests of France. So it was like, and that's what's also funny because FIFA tries to sort of like market themselves as like, we're just about the football, but we care. I mean, it's as if they don't know what they want to be like, but clearly football is politics. Sports is politics in general.
There's so much football and there's so much politics in that.
And there's
committee.
money. That's the biggest issue. That money. There's so much money in football. Like it's probably one of the most commercially successful businesses like in the world, probably.
Yeah.
And like where there's money, there's usually fire, right? So.
Yeah, and so, Nicolas Sarkozy as well, interesting thing, he's now being investigated for sort of bad election practice in France. So you have a lot of figures here that just are not very savory people as it is. And, it's pretty clear just by looking at, I've got written here at the bottom of my notes, that it's pretty obvious. All you have to do is look at the other countries that were bidding for that same World Cup. And you'll see by the other stuff that we lay out in this episode that Qatar is just the most mindless
it just made
host.
No
it
sense.
makes no logical sense.
No.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would say that is good about the World Cup in Qatar is that it does open football sort of to the Arab world. And it gives the Arab world a chance to, the rest of the world has had their chance. I guess except, I don't think there's been a World Cup in Australia or New Zealand. Ever?
Australasia. I mean, I guess, do you count Japan, Korea, and is that Asia?
Asia, I guess. But then the rest of the world has had a World Cup, so it will be interesting to see how they take it. But I think everything that's sort of behind this World Cup is already putting such a bad look on it, and it's really. I mean, disclaimer, we're gonna still watch the World Cup, right? Like, we're not gonna not watch the World Cup, but there is a sour taste behind this World Cup. And I mean, even the Russia one was already that's kind of heavy to swallow that we have to watch a World Cup in Russia. But now this, and also with all the other stuff we're going to get on about, which maybe we should move on to.
Let's move on. So I think
it's sort of the worker rights, human rights issue that's been going on in Qatar.
So this is, I think, one of the main talking points and what everyone's heard about is the problem with the migrant workers in Qatar. So Qatar, a lot of the construction and work that needed to be done for this World Cup was around building 7 completely new stadiums and then refurbishing one other one. But they also had a bunch of public transport initiatives that they were doing. I think a rail system that they were bringing in. And the thing about the country of Qatar is that the citizens that do live there and live there permanently, they are some of the richest in the world. It's one of the richest countries in the world. But that also means that they don't have a lot of people to do these hard labor jobs.
Yeah.
So I think at the moment, I think Amnesty International estimates that there's about 1.7 million migrant workers.
Which is almost double the amount of the permanent population of Qatar, right?
Which is crazy on its own. But they brought in an estimated 30,000 laborers to work solely on the projects associated with the World Cup. And so a lot of outroar began with this, with a piece that The Guardian did, which said that 6,500 migrant workers had died working on the stadiums in Qatar.
Yep.
But this figure is a little bit misleading as it sort of happens. So that figure is comes from all migrant workers from India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Those are some of the main countries
Yeah,
that
that travel
supply,
over, right?
yeah, migrant workers. But the thing is, that figure actually included sort of deaths of family members related to
Right.
the migrant workers. Also included deaths from natural causes, old age.
Yeah. So it
So
just sort of included migrant workers
yeah,
as a
it
whole,
was
not construction related
yeah,
deaths
and
all the
also
time.
not specifically rated to the World Cup.
Right, just things that
Um,
happen to migrant or like old age, what it is,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So, but the thing is, there's still a lot of malpractice going on
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
actual workers on the World Cup. So the actual estimates from sort of Human Rights Watch and organizations like Amnesty International, 37 deaths from, I think these are the statistics from the Qatari government. So 37
Right.
deaths of workers working on the construction sites.
That's 37 too many.
That's
if you
37
ask
too
me.
many, yeah. But also that doesn't take into account workers that died of possibly heart conditions, respiratory
Right.
issues, and the respiratory issues and the heart conditions is a strong indicator of heat stroke, which
Right.
is
mean,
obviously a huge issue.
Just think
in
about that,
Qatar.
right? Like the whole part. Another thing that was so controversial about this World Cup is that we're having it in November and December, which is something that's been unheard of. The World Cup is always in summer, right? But so, and why was it done? Well, because temperatures in summer reach up to what, like 50 or more than 50 degrees during the middle of the day. So obviously, we have to care about the players and stuff, but that didn't stop them from having people work during summer hours on hours on hours. Excuse me, at this like 50-degree heat, where obviously like those issues like heart issues, respiratory disease, it's gonna come. Like
Yeah.
if you're working under 50 degrees, and also they're not like, it's been proven that they were underfed, they were dehydrated most of the time, they were not taken care of properly. Anybody that tried to leave, like you couldn't, they would take your
So
passport
this
away,
is
right?
this is the system that migrant workers are working under in Qatar is a system called the kafala system, which essentially translates to sponsorship system. So these workers are brought over, and their sponsor, called their sponsor, but it's pretty much their employer. And so the sponsor pretty much you need permission from your sponsor if you want to leave your job. You need permission from your sponsor if you want to change
So
job.
you're basically like a glorified slave under the
Yeah,
system.
and there's a huge power imbalance between the worker and the employer.
sponsor, yeah.
The sponsor, and also you've got to remember that a lot of people had their passports taken away,
Yeah.
so they couldn't leave the country when they came in. And the sponsor is also responsible for the living quarters of these workers as well, which I'll see if I can get some photos on the actual edit for this, but they're pretty disgusting
Yeah, they're
conditions.
dreadful
They're-
conditions.
Yeah,
What humans under.
yeah, living in poverty, and these are people that have left their home country to find
To
money
escape
get
this
to
poverty
get
and-
and there's also been workers weren't getting their wages on time, and this is money that they were sending back to their families in places like India, Bangladesh, and stuff like that as well. And also the average salary, I think, was $220 a month. $220 a month is the average salary.
For what, like probably 10 to 11 to 12 hours of building these
Yeah.
insane stadiums that we're seeing now.
So yeah,
And not just the stadiums, I mean the World Cup Village, all the other hotels. I mean, Qatar, I think the reason why they were lucky that they got this bid so far back is that they were able to prepare for it. And because Qatar in 2009, 10, and even let's say if the World Cup would have been in 2014, it was not prepared as a country to host
No.
the World Cup. They didn't have the resorts that they do now. They didn't have the stadiums. That's a big one, right? They didn't have the stadiums. I mean, and also just like all the other kind of bullshit that came out from Qatar itself, saying that like, no, we do respect human rights and we are trying to improve the human rights. I mean, Amnesty International went and they were basically like, "What is this? Like, this is
Yeah.
awful."
Yeah. So yeah, I think those initial Guardian allegations came out in 2010, so a long
Quite
time ago.
early, yeah.
But also in 2014, following sort of more allegations, the Qatari government came out and said that they would reduce the impact of the kafala system, which is obviously that sponsorship system, leading to more workers' rights. And so they officially gave them permission to leave when they wanted to change jobs if they wanted to. They sort of tried to figure out the passport thing as well. But then Amnesty International and these other human rights groups went to Qatar to see if there was any progress done, and there was a lot of the same issues.
Yep.
A lot of passports being withheld. Living conditions were still shocking, and if you were caught filming around these living conditions, they banned filming around any places that had migrant workers in them, around the stadiums as well.
This is the perfect, like, if you went to the dictionary and look for the definition of sports washing, this World Cup is absolutely the perfect definition of sports washing.
Yeah. So it's the whole workers' rights situation there is atrocious and still is.
Yeah, I mean, I also found that 4 journalists from the BBC, they went to Qatar to sort of do a piece on the World Cup and the progress that Qatar was doing. And they were filming, at one point they went to film where all the workers are, and they were all arrested. All 4 of them for filming there.
Yeah.
So, and that's, and like, this is just what's going on with the workers. I mean, like, if we just look at the bigger picture, you know, sort of their records with the LGBTQ community, which FIFA has tried so hard to, like, make the game more inclusive to everyone. And that's, I think it's such a great thing, because, like, obviously there's, like, a common conception that LGBTQ sort of culture cannot coexist with sports culture, but that's so not true, because sports are for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, what you identify as, what your preferences are. Like, sport, especially a sport like football that is so worldwide, is for everybody. And I thought that FIFA had been doing such a good job, you know, in the Premier League. Well, that's not FIFA, that's the sort of the Football Association of England, but the fact that they wear, you know, the rainbow armbands or the rainbow laces. And you know, Man City is a club that has an LGBTQ plus support group, and it has, like, sort of Man City LGBTQ not fan section, but like a fan group. And they, you know, like, they've really gone so many steps forward in that, like, removing the stigma that, you know, being gay doesn't exist with football. Like, that stigma is gone. But now we're going to do a World Cup where homosexuality is literally illegal. Like, you go to jail for 7 years if you're found to be gay.
Yeah, it's sort of one step forward, 2 steps back.
Exactly,
sort of
absolutely.
So I mean, sort of transitioning into the general human rights abuses in Qatar, being a member of the LGBTQ plus community is sort of a crime there. You can go to prison for homosexuality is still illegal in Qatar and is punishable by up to 3 years in prison or by death, but that's only for Muslims living under Sharia law.
Right.
So that's I don't think there's actually been anyone put
executed
to death for homosexuality there. But still, obviously, very limited rights. And they're on November 8th, so literally last week, a Khalid Salman, FIFA Qatar World Cup ambassador, so someone that is essentially on the payroll of FIFA, stated in an interview with a German TV that homosexuality was, quote, a damage in the mind, and that, it's sort of not right.
And also the fact that he said that, because I listened to that sort of quote that he did, and he started it off by saying, you know, respect our tradition, respect our culture, respect our law, basically, which, you know, like, homosexuality should not be illegal anywhere in the world, because, like, just because you are what you are doesn't make you illegal. I mean, it's the same as kind of like, basically any law that's just discriminatory, it's just not okay anymore. But then that guy went from that to saying that like homosexuality and being part of this group means that you're demented. Like, how could we have
a little bit higher?
How could we have FIFA do, like, just FIFA host a World Cup in a country that doesn't even respect, like, and not just the LGBTQ community, like it doesn't even respect women, like.
Yeah, so yeah, women's rights. Obviously, there's still you've got sort of the guardianship laws that are still in effect there. So let me see if I can pull this up here. Yeah, so women obviously have very limited freedoms under the guardianship system. So men still control a lot of crucial decisions in a woman's life, like if they want to study abroad, you know, if they want to who they want to marry, and also divorce laws in Qatar discriminate a lot against the woman. So for starters, it's extremely difficult to get a divorce, and divorced women are not allowed to be guardians of their children after the divorce.
Wow.
So yeah, really one-sided there.
There was also a case of a Mexican woman who traveled in 2015. She had like I think she was an economist or something like this, and she traveled there, and then she was sexually assaulted. And when she went to the police to complain that, you know, to say I was sexually assaulted, they tried to put her in jail for having extramarital relationships. Like, clearly, like, that is wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, very recent stories as well, that have come out about sort of discriminatory practices by security forces. So a Qatari bisexual woman came out and said that she was arrested and they beat her until she was unconscious several times. And then they blindfolded her, took her to another place, and then, yeah, sort of restrained her for weeks in sort of solitary confinement.
wow.
And there's more stories like this. I've got an extract from a transgender woman here that was arrested by preventative security in public in Doha, which is the capital.
Which is where basically the World Cup is hosted. I think out of the 8 stadiums, only one is not in Doha, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So she said, and this is a quote, the preventative security police are a mafia. They detained me twice, once for 2 months in a solitary cell underground and once for 6 weeks. They beat me every day and shaved my hair. They also made me take off my shirt and took a picture of my breasts. I suffered from depression because of my detention. I still have nightmares to this day, and I'm terrified of being in public.
And yet FIFA decided that this was the place,
the place
that
to hold the
should
World Cup.
even be allowed to bid for the World Cup. Like, I get it, the game, you know, football is for everybody, but like, there has to be just a better selection process about who's bidding. I know that probably means that then we're going to get most of the World Cups. And obviously, it's not like every country is fine outside of Qatar. Like, you know, if the World Cup were to be hosted in the U.S., you could talk racial issues and, you know, a lot. Yeah, just in every country, there's always issues. But I think, like, where Qatar is, like, and how it's, yeah, just everything that we've seen and the build up to this World Cup, which we've had 12 years now of build up for it. It hasn't shown, like, it's just shown that FIFA made an awful mistake.
Yeah, I mean, and then you've got the system of government in Qatar is not a democratic system as well. And I'm not saying that you can't have, I mean, yeah, it's not like democracy is in the best shape in the world at the moment anyway, but sort of the way the system works there, I think they have the emir, E-M-I-R, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but he is the pretty much head. And then you have the only part that is sort of an elected piece is a consultative assembly, but the majority of the power still sits with the one man, and that is a hereditary monarchy. So really sort of ancient system in terms of political freedoms as well. And sort of Freedom House, which is an organization that rates countries in terms of their political and social freedoms, rates them at a score of 25 out of 100. So definitely in the lower half, yeah, and sort of that's reflected as well in a number of issues with sort of journalism and journalists being arrested there. But what is rather interesting on the point of journalism is that Al Jazeera is actually funded by the Qatari government,
Yeah.
and that is probably regarded as one of the most unbiased
Yeah.
news sources in the world, and the biggest news source in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's quite interesting. But let's move on from human rights abuses, and I want to talk about the environmental impact of this World Cup. So obviously, every World Cup has a pretty big impact on the environment. Largely, the biggest part is fans traveling to the country. But FIFA marketed this as a carbon neutral World Cup. And a lot of that is going to be done through the purchasing of CO2 buybacks and stuff like that. So a CO2 buyback is pretty much when a company or an organization pays a sum of money to either plant a bunch of trees or keep a section of trees from being cut down.
Right.
Yeah. So interesting about these things. I think John Oliver did a really good piece on this, and pretty much he talks about how this buyback system, a lot of the time, the areas of trees that these companies are buying back are actually not destined to be cut down at all in the first place.
Right. So
they're part of like nature reserves and stuff like that. So it's really insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
It's kind of just like a pseudo buyback. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm buying these trees, but well, no one was going to touch them anyway.
Yeah.
It's like,
and so that's how they were making this carbon neutral. But also, they estimated initially that the World Cup would create 3.6 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. But new estimates suggest that it's more around 6 million, so almost double what the initial estimate was. So yeah, not great. And then you just look at the basic facts of the stadium. So you have to build 7 stadiums. That's obviously
like in the space of a decade. Like
Yeah.
7 stadiums.
that's
like,
obviously going to have a huge impact on the environment. And on top of that, Qatar per capita is the highest CO2 emitter in the world, by a long shot as well. So yeah, it's in terms of the environmental impact, it's looking like it's going to be worse than any other World Cup.
Which I mean, it's also like, it makes sense considering that it's, I think, the most expensive World Cup ever, isn't it? It's costing Qatar like $360 billion US. And for comparison, South Africa spent 3.5 billion. So like, what is that? Like 300 times more? I don't know the math,
I don't know. But yeah, so really in terms of the environmental thing as well. And it's in summer and you have all these people. So air conditioning, for one, is just going to be through the roof. These are open air stadiums and they have air conditioning
inside
in them.
So that's like so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It's like turning on the heater and opening the window.
Yeah,
Like, what are you doing?
But obviously, in the grand scheme of the World Cup, the air conditioning in terms of emissions is pretty negligible.
Yeah.
But it's still something you got to look at and say like, hey, you're trying to how are you being
And also,
environmentally
how many
conscious?
air conditioning? Like, I mean, there's gonna be there's 4 games a day basically once the World Cup truly kicks off. I guess only for the groups. I guess later on it'll be less and less. But then, like 4 games. That's 4 stadiums that are fully packed, like just pumping air conditioning, but also open. So
yeah. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And then, I mean, all of what we've said here kind of contributes to those first points as to why the hell Qatar was given the World Cup in the first place. It really does not make any sense. And then I think the last sort of point that we want to make maybe is the effect that this season is having on the players.
yeah.
So
I mean, just the list of superstars that we're gonna miss in this World Cup alone.
Yeah, and I mean, just because of the amount of games that have been played already this season, because they're cramming to get all these games in before the World Cup, and they're cramming once they get back.
I mean, as we were talking about earlier, Manchester City and Liverpool are playing the day after the World Cup final in the League Cup in England. So, I mean, my expectation is that both teams will be heavily rotated, right? Like, there's probably not going to be really anybody from the starting 11. But how crazy is that? Like, you just finished the World Cup. Like, let's say that, I don't know, Belgium, so De Bruyne would be there, and like I don't know, Brazil and Fabinho and some other and Alisson. Like, how long are those guys gonna take from playing the World Cup final? And now you're asking them to play either the next day, and then a week later the Premier League is back on
Yeah.
Boxing Day.
Yeah.
A week later, how do you even have time? You don't even have time to celebrate that you won the World Cup if you play in the
Yeah.
Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Like
insane.
England, if England managed to win the World Cup,
They won,
that's
though.
half they won't. But then that's basically like all of the star players in the Premier League gone for like a month. Like, what's the Premier League gonna look like then? Like, is it just
Yeah.
gonna be a bunch of guys who rarely playing? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so up to this point, I did a few calculations. My maths isn't great, but I think these numbers are pretty accurate. So Manchester United have played 22 games since the beginning of the Premier League season so far, which is
Early
when
August,
did we,
like 5th of
early
August,
August,
something
yeah,
like that. That's
till this
5th, 6th
point.
of August.
And this is high level professional sport. These guys are running close to 17, 18 kilometers in a game.
Yeah.
You know, which is an obscene amount of physical exertion, and then
And mentally too, like you
Yeah.
know, when we like, let's say that we play for like I play football, right? I train twice a week, 2 hours each time, and then I play on Sundays. Okay, of course you want to win the game and stuff, but I'm not playing for anything. Like, it's not my livelihood. I just play for fun. Like, these guys are playing for personal glory, for team glory, for bonuses, for their jobs. Like, if
Yeah.
you play bad, then you're not gonna play football.
Yeah.
Like, and you have to play what, 3 times a week? Maybe you play like, if you're United, you have to play like City on Sunday. Then you gotta make sure you get out your group of the Europa League, and then you gotta play Spurs on the next Sunday. Like, the mental stress that this brings you, and also the fear. I don't think that I'm assuming that most players throughout the course of this half season or quarter of a season we've had were terrified of getting injured, because it probably
Yeah.
meant that the World Cup was over.
Yeah, and they've seen their teammates dropping like flies.
I mean, we
essentially, as
lost
well,
like
yeah.
Senegal was probably one of the teams that I was looking forward to watching the most, because they just seemed so exciting. It really seemed like they were the African team that was going to take a big step. And I'm not saying that they're bad now, but the fact that they lost Sadio Mane, like, that's huge that they
huge,
lost Sadio
yeah.
Mane.
Yeah, and back to the amount of games that are going to be played when they come back. Like you said, they've got the EFL Cup game literally the day after the final. Obviously, if someone's playing the final, they're not going to be there. But sort of, if Man City do what Liverpool did last season and play every single game that they can that season, they will have, from Boxing Day to the end of the season, so this isn't even including the EFL Cup game that you were talking about,
Yeah.
they have 23 remaining Premier League games, as well as their potential European fixtures. So Manchester City could be looking at 40 games after the World Cup.
Christmas.
After Christmas.
And we have the second most players at the World Cup. We have 16 players that have been selected from Man City. So it's not like these guys are just taking a break and going to play 40 games. No, they're playing football at the highest level, at this competition that brings you the most glory, but also probably the most mental stress, because there's probably nothing like winning a World Cup, especially when you play. I mean, the City players that are going, they don't play for Qatar or Ecuador. Like, they're playing for Belgium, Argentina, Brazil, like
They have a
teams
real
with
chance,
aspirations
yeah.
to win the World Cup, you know? So it's ridiculous the amount, like, how we're running football players into the ground. Like, we're just going to see either players retire way earlier or have catastrophic injuries.
Yeah.
Like, Mbappe is what, 23, 24? 24, I think.
22, 23?
Yeah, something like that. He, like, what are his knees going to look like at age 28 if he continues playing this much football? Like, he'll be a piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've got a list here. I'm just going to run through the names
Go for
of...
it. I mean, they're all basically, like, elite level
Yeah,
footballers,
exactly.
aren't
These
they?
are guys that would 100% be either shoo-ins for a spot in their World Cup squad, or
Shooting as a starter, even. Some
yeah,
of them, right?
a good majority of them. So we've got Prinzel Kimpembe from France.
France have been depleted.
Yeah, have been destroyed.
man.
He would have been a starter, or
Probably, yeah, but maybe, yeah.
Paul Pogba would have
Probably
been
started.
N'Golo Kante,
Probably
also
would have
a starter. Mike Mannion, is that how you say his name?
I think
Mannion?
it's I think like that.
Yeah.
He might. I mean, I don't think he would have because Lloris is captain.
But he
he's
would have
a
been
very
there.
good
Yeah.
goalkeeper. He would have been there.
Yeah. Timo Werner maybe
Yeah.
wouldn't have started, but would have been there. Florian Wirtz, youngster.
That's such a
definitely,
shame,
yeah.
man. But he's been injured for a while too.
Yeah.
He's been injured for a while. But
Diego Jota,
that's a big one for
Yeah,
Portugal. A
huge.
missing one. Yeah.
Jorginho Wijnaldum would have
Yeah,
started as
he
well.
would have started.
Yeah. Alexis Salamakers for Belgium. Not too sure if he would have been a starter, but big loss for them. Diego Carlos, Brazil.
Yeah.
Maybe wouldn't have
I
started.
mean, he would have
but
played.
Yeah.
Though, I think.
Artur Melo, also Brazil.
Yeah. I don't think he
Questionable
would have
whether
been selected.
Ben Chilwell probably.
Yeah, he would have been
gone.
selected.
Yeah.
He would have started. I think.
Reece James definitely would have gone.
He would have started.
Jesus Corona,
He would have started
Yeah.
for Mexico.
Marco Royce again.
Again, that guy is just so
Again,
unlucky,
yeah.
man. We lost Gio Lo Celso as well,
And Lo
Argentina.
Celso, yeah, he's my last
And
name on the.
I mean, we're not really talking about football, but he was key. He was a key player in our Copa America win and sort of this upturn in form. So it's just crazy to see how literally just running players into their own grave, like forcing them, like squeezing every inch of every juice of money that they can. out of these
Exactly, that's
football
what it
players,
is,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Like a towel, just wringing
Yeah.
them out, trying to make.
and
as
then you
many
got
bucks
you
as
got
possible.
jokers trying to make a super league and shit like that.
Yeah,
It's,
to play more fucking football.
to play
like-
even more games. Yeah. So yeah, I think that pretty much concludes all of
Yeah.
our points that we wanted to make, and we definitely don't want to tell people not to watch the World
No,
Cup
because we are going
gonna
to
watch it. Yeah.
We just wanted to sort of bring some awareness to it and not seem. I feel like it would be a bit tone deaf to just kind of be like, oh, these are our World Cup predictions and not mention all the stuff that's going
Yeah.
on, because there are a lot of issues. And maybe if you're listening, you find it a bit hypocritical that we're still going to watch it, but we don't select where the World Cup is
Exactly.
played.
Yeah.
We just enjoy it. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you're boycotting it, props to you, because I personally couldn't. But
Yeah, I mean, I think of it sort of this way. We, as football fans, as diehard football fans, you wait 4 years for this World Cup, and like you said, we have absolutely no say as to where it ends up. And I'm sure if there was a worldwide democratic vote, it would not have ended up.
It would have been
Qatar.
in the U.S. during the summer already.
Probably would have been in India or China because they got the most
Yeah,
people.
that's true. They do have a lot of people there. Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, we just want to bring a little bit of attention to some really important facts about really the corrupt nature
of
this World
FIFA
Cup.
and especially of this World Cup.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're going to
That's
wrap
the,
it up. But
that's-
our second part, we'll be talking more about the World Cup. So if you don't care about the politics and only came for the football, then stick around. It will be a separate episode, not one long one. But stick around and we'll see you there.